So I assume you're thinking about moving to the Dallas, Texas metro, and at this point you're trying to figure out where you should actually live. Well, in this video, we're actually going to talk to somebody that's lived in 5 different areas around the Dallas, Texas metro. It's really hard to find people that have lived in more than 2 places in the DFW metro, and honestly, it's amazing that we got to talk to Brock today because he brings a different perspective. He's lived in places like Fort Worth, he's lived in Plano, he's lived in Argyle, he's lived in several other places. And today he's going to give us insight into each of those places and ultimately what led him to live in each of those places in the first place and what led him to leave as well. At the end, he's going to reveal what his favorite place to live is so far and what areas he recommends people actually live. Hey, it's Michael Caraway. I'm a realtor here in the Dallas, Texas metro, and on this channel, we talk about what it's actually like to live here in the Dallas, Texas metro, as well as what are some of the best places to live, so that you can figure out if Dallas is a good fit for you. Without further ado, let's jump into the interview with Brock Irwin right now. Brock, I'm super excited to talk to you today because you're probably one of the few people that I've known that have lived in more than 2 places in the Dallas, Texas metro. In fact, you've lived in 5 different places here in the DFW metro. So I'm super excited to get your insight and bring that insight to all the people that are looking to move from out of state to this area, because I think you're going to be able to kind of speed up that learning curve for a lot of these people wondering where they should live.
Definitely. Yeah, I moved down here with nobody. I didn't know a single soul. I had a couple friends back up in Illinois where I'm originally from that had previously been down at TCU. So I started out down that direction in Fort Worth. It was a pretty cool starting point, but it's really just shooting it from the cuff, trying to figure out what I liked here.
That's awesome, man. It's such a cool experience to move out of state. A lot of emotions moving away from home. But it's cool to kind of start your life somewhere new. And you mentioned you started in Fort Worth, and like even me being here for a while now, I live in Dallas. Fort Worth seems like another country, and and it's kind of funny I said country because that's what I associate. I associate it with a bunch of cowboys and people wearing boots and stuff like that. Like, is that like the reality of Fort Worth, or what's it actually like living there?
Man, compared to being over in Dallas, I'm in Plano now, but compared to being on this side, yes, it feels like you're out in the western, more Texas feel than what you get if you're in Dallas. You can forget that you're even in Texas if you're in Dallas. But over in Fort Worth, you're still going to see the cowboy hats, the Wrangler jeans, talking about two-stepping, go down the stockyards, and you really feel, if you've watched 1883 on the Yellowstone series, that's actually what it's like down there. Some of those bars in that show are still up and running in Fort Worth. So definitely got more of the Western feel. And my background was coming from a place growing up on a farm. So like, okay, good starting point. Get to see what being a Texan's really like.
For sure. That's super, super interesting. What was life like in Fort Worth as far as like, when you were looking for something to do on the weekends, like what were some of those things that you would do?
Yeah, so mine was a different scene than most people coming down. So I left when I was 21, left Southern Illinois, moved down here not knowing a soul. But I came here specifically because of a seminary that was in Fort Worth, Southwestern Seminary. So started there. So my weekends were trying to figure out, okay, how do I meet people? Because I am very, very bored sitting in this. It was a little tiny apartment in South Fort Worth, and just had to figure it out and ended up finding a really good church, which we'll get to my other locations that I've lived in DFW from this, but another church in Flower Mound, Texas, and met a lot of friends there. So I found myself traveling north a lot throughout the weekends just to be able to meet new people and figure it out. But there's a young crowd. So when I was 21 in Fort Worth, there's plenty of people. I wasn't far from TCU. There's a lot of nightlife in Fort Worth. So I was able to meet people at the bar. I'm a very social person, outgoing.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I think you can find that in Dallas too. If you're looking for like a younger crowd and you like going to bars and stuff like that, it is a little bit different in the suburbs, which we can kind of talk about different places where you can get a little bit of that in the suburbs as well. I think you can get a little bit of that in Plano, which we'll get to eventually. But as far as like, job opportunities and I guess, do you feel like there's a good like economy in Fort Worth? Like, do you feel like there's a good job economy? Like, what kind of opportunities did you see while you were there?
Man, I can't speak too strongly on that. I worked in retail during my time in Fort Worth, and I wasn't too aware of what was going on during my time there. So I can't speak too strongly on it, but I know downtown is pretty vibrant. I know there's a lot of my friends worked in marketing. A few of the or the high rises that are downtown there, they always were hustling and bustling through it, like the same city feel that you get in Dallas, just a little bit smaller. So I'm from near St. Louis, so it was more of a small city feel being in Fort Worth compared to this large and almost overwhelming feel of like approaching Dallas. So I would say yes, but I can't speak too deeply onto that topic.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good point. Like there's Dallas and Fort
Mm-hmm.
Worth are very different just from like, looking at the skylines. Like
Mm-hmm.
Dallas is pretty massive when it comes to buildings, relatively speaking, compared to, what's in Fort Worth for,
Mm-hmm.
all the buildings there. While you were in Fort Worth, like what were some of like the cons of living there? Like what didn't you like about living there?
Honestly, since I was from around a smaller city, I wanted to come and experience the bigger parts of Texas. So seeing what Dallas is like, seeing what else there was to experience, because it felt very similar to what I've been in before. So wouldn't be a con of the city, but more of a con of my experience coming into the city. But there are so many cool things to do outside in Fort Worth that I kind of miss about being over there.
Like what are some of those things?
The biggest thing, which I took everybody that ever visits me, and even if they come down now, I'll still take them over there. It's the Water Gardens, which is the most like beautiful little park on that's on the south side of the city, and you can just walk through the city. It's really pleasant compared, which you can do that in Dallas, but it's just really peaceful in Fort Worth. It feels like a little slower pace than what you'll get on this side where we're at now.
That's a really good point too. Like if you're looking for a little slower pace, Fort Worth and some of those areas might be a little bit better than Dallas. So good
Hmm.
point there. And kind of to wrap up Fort Worth, like who would you say is the right kind of person for living in Fort Worth? Like I know you mentioned like slower pace. Is there anything else that you kind of say the different stages of life or any recommendations for who Fort Worth is for?
Honestly, the slower pace is the first thing that sticks out. Over that direction, you're gonna get a little bit more wide openness, which relates to being more the Western Texas type of feel. You're gonna have some open lots that you can be able to have some space to feel like you're outside of the city. Whereas here in the suburbs, which we're both pretty close to each other, it's a little bit more contained. But over in Fort Worth, it's a slower pace. Feels like it's a more spread out area. So a lot of families. Most of my friends over there were younger families, so young like 20s and 30s, 40s. Um, so yeah, it really comes down to pace for me.
Okay, got it. So you ended up moving away from Fort Worth, and where did you
Mm-hmm.
land next after that?
Yeah, so what I mentioned earlier, I met this great church up in Flower Mound and just started hanging out with some friends. And I was living in an apartment down in South Fort Worth, so and I hated it. It was a little cracker box, so I needed a little bit more space. Met this guy who really good friend, and he said, "Man, I just bought a 3 bedroom house in Argyle, Texas," and I was like, "Okay, well, I'm more than willing to move." And he'd offered me his upstairs section, so I got a whole half of a house up in Argyle and got to start experiencing more of the outskirts. Argyle is starting to get out there. It's past the Motor Speedway. I'd never even been up that far by the time, or at the time that I was moving. So it was really cool to really you see open fields, you see longhorns, you pass the Motor Speedway and it's just wide open, literally cornfields. Um, Really made me relate to what it was like back home in Southern Illinois, which being in the Iowa world.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny how you kind of transport back to home
Hmm.
when you get into some of
Yep.
those areas. It feels very similar to the Midwest. So, is that? I mean, so tell me about your experience, like transitioning from Fort Worth to Argyle. Like, what did you like about that area? What didn't you like?
And I absolutely loved Argyle. So it was the area I lived in. It was the Harvest community, so it was brand new when we got there. The whole neighborhood was probably 2 years old, the oldest house. So you had this wide open, just expansive space that you could do anything. But There was a nice pond in the area, so me and my buddies would always go fishing. We could always find ways to ride bikes, and you just get off the beaten path pretty easily. So it just felt free and a lot calmer, more of like being in a town, starting to feel a community, which I really really liked. When I was in Fort Worth and trying to get on my feet here in Texas, I didn't have really any community. So having that there, having more of a small town, and you knew your community, you knew your neighbor. So that's I really enjoyed that for that season.
That's awesome. And Harvest is an awesome neighborhood. There's a lot of
Hmm.
similar neighborhoods like that sprinkled throughout the DFW metro. It's it's really cool. Like, even though you are out in not the middle of nowhere, but you're further out than a lot of places,
Hmm.
right? And you are surrounded by fields. It's like, but when you're in those types of communities, you don't feel like it. Like it's
Hmm.
so they're all super nice, landscaped really well. You've got things to do like fishing or the trails within it. A lot of these communities, I can't speak to Harvest specifically, but they have, gyms in on
Hmm.
location, pools that you can use, all that
Hmm.
kind of stuff. So that just, as you get further outside the metro, some of those opportunities open up to where you get those master plan communities that you can just basically stay there and live your life there. You never have to leave.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah, there's everything. So I'd go to the gym in the morning. It's right there, right in the middle of the community. Then there's a coffee shop in the community. I can just walk, do my little circle, and get back to the house. So it was a really cool time. I love having community like that and being able to know, like, literally knock on the next door neighbor and feel like you jump back 30 years and ask for a bag of sugar.
Yeah,
So I never
right.
did that exact example, but like there were multiple times that we asked for a beer or a whiskey with our neighbor. So it was really fun.
That's awesome. That's cool. And so when you were living in Argyle, what part of town were you working? Were you having to commute anywhere?
Yeah, so I was still working in Fort Worth at the time. So I worked for Sprint and then T-Mobile after they merged a few years back. And so I was commuting all the way down to almost into the city. It was near 820. So probably a 20 to 30-minute drive every day, depending on traffic. And that part of 35 is just known for always having construction. So getting down to the city from there was tough, but I'm a morning person. I'd always like to get into my shifts as early as I possibly could. So I never really had to deal with it.
Okay. And what was the commute to Dallas like if you ever had to get over there? Was that doable?
Yeah, it was doable. In Argyle, it felt like a planned thing. You really needed to set aside time or know a few days in advance. Oh, I'm gonna go to Dallas later this week. So it wasn't just something that you could really do off the cuff because it's going to be a solid hour. One of my good friends still lives over there, and we'll make the trip back and forth. And if there's traffic, it takes me about an hour and 20 minutes to get from Plano to the Harvest community.
Okay. Got it. And one of the other things I was curious about with being in Argyle, like if you wanted to, go out to eat or if you wanted to like go to a town center or something like that, like what
Mhm.
was the closest thing for you to do at the time that you lived there?
Yeah, going out to eat, there's a couple options. So fast food, trying to get something late at night, you're driving more towards Fort Worth. There's a lot of stuff built up around Texas Motor Speedway, which was 10 minutes down 35. But the really fun spot, if you're wanting to do something on the weekends without going to Dallas, without going to Fort Worth, there was Denton. And Denton was, for me, I was 22 at the time. So there's University of North Texas there. There's a ton of really cool bars, really cool restaurants that rooftop. I think LSA Burger, delicious rooftop on the square. So that was the big thing that I would love to do. But that was probably 20 minutes north of Argyle.
Okay. Yeah, and that's that's definitely a strength of
Hmm.
Argyle is that you have Fort Worth to the south and you also have Denton to the north. And
Hmm.
also really excited that LSA Burger has a location in Grandscape now.
I
It's
know.
it's amazing. It's way
Yeah,
too
I'm very
convenient.
excited. I haven't eaten at the new one yet, but I'm very excited. I love that spot.
Yeah, it's a good spot. Cool, man. So, who would you recommend Argyle for?
Argyle is really, really family focused. So there weren't many people like me, other than renters that you'd find in if you're moving down towards Fort Worth or up towards Denton. But most of Argyle was all families. So I felt a little bit at like an outsider. I was very welcome just because getting in there with the church that I was with. So you always have your groups that you're going to be with, but I was always the only single person that would be at the dinner. Always single, only single person at the party in the whole neighborhood. So Luckily, I had my roommate who owned the house at the time, so I had him to hang out with. But it was definitely for families. There's barely anybody that's just a one-off that's coming in that area.
Makes sense. Okay. So moving away from Argyle, you ended up in Flower Mound, is that right?
hmm So
Okay,
right up the
tell me about
road.
Flower Mound. Yeah,
Yeah.
what brought you
So
there? What was it like?
yeah. So my connection to Flower Mound was originally that church that I ran into in Fort Worth, and it was probably 20 minutes down 407, the road running from Argyle to Flower Mound. And my buddy that I was living with decided to get married, so I was like, okay, I got to kick out and get my own place. So
Dang,
found a house,
brutal.
and yeah, I know it was tough. It was like on a whim. I had 2 weeks to get out. He was like single to married. It was crazy, but moved right down 407, a house in South Flower Mound. Absolutely loved it. Flower Mound, I for a time thought Flower Mound was going to be where I was at for the rest of my life. So it's a really cool community. It's the type of place I could walk into Tom Thumb and see somebody I knew every single time and stop and have a conversation. It was a really cool town to be in.
Yeah, I mean, what made you fall in love with it so much? Was it just the people or what things to do? Like what did you love about that area?
So there are not many things to do. So if you go to Flower Mound, you're typically leaving Flower Mound to do anything. There's a couple cool spots like Marty B's. If you haven't been there, check out Marty B's, man. It is such a good spot. Outside of that, there's Buffalo Wild Wings, just the typical suburb type of food. Not many cool spots. So the big thing that made me love it though is after being in Argyle, I was like, I still want to explore, and just kind of my original itch of getting out of Fort Worth. I want to explore DFW. So I had the opportunity to be a little bit closer to Dallas. It was probably 40 minutes to Dallas, but it was also 40 minutes to Fort Worth and about 30 minutes from Denton. So I was like right in the middle of everything, where it was still a drive, but it didn't feel like as much of a chore.
For sure. And one of the cool things about being up in Flower Mound is that you're close to Grapevine Lake. You're like pretty much
hmm
right on it, right? Like, did you ever
hmm
take advantage of that?
Yeah, so we could just walk down to the lake. Where I was at, I was probably 3 minutes from Grapevine, so we could literally walk down the lake. There are a ton of spots to hang out and go hiking, camping. I didn't ever do any camping down there, but there's a ton of campsites just scattered around Grapevine Lake, which is really cool.
That's awesome. So yes, I mean, you mentioned some cons, like fewer things to do. Is there anything else that you kind of caution people about Flower Mound?
Yeah, you can feel secluded from like if you want to forget that you're in DFW, you can definitely do it there. So there's no major roads really running through. It's just a couple streets that go this way, and you could live your whole life there. There's a ton of small businesses. There's plenty of food. There's plenty of things to do locally. There's not going to have all the fun stuff, but you could definitely seclude yourself from even being in DFW, being in Flower Mound. And some people didn't ever see other parts of the Metroplex. Where I was like, man, I've only been here like 2 years and I've done all of these things, and they haven't left Flower Mound in 5 years.
That's funny. Yeah, I've definitely found that with a few different areas in town where people kind of
hmm
just they settle in there and don't get out and explore much. But that's kind of the beauty of this area. Like you can do that, but you also have the ability to drive 30, 40 minutes and get a lot of different places.
Yeah, definitely, man. So after that, I found myself consistently going down to Dallas. I made a good friend. So I was 23 at the time now, and made a good friend that was going to SMU. And I just kept finding myself driving down there. We're hanging out, trying to explore new things. And I'm like, I'd only seen like the stuff on Google. You Google find a bar or a cool place to go in Dallas, and you just get the most popular spots. But once I started hanging out with him, it was, oh, here's the dive bar that people actually like. Here's the hole in the wall restaurant that has the best food in the whole neighborhood that you have to check out that no one else would find. You're not going to just find it on Google. So we started doing that and hanging out with him for months at a time, and then like, man, you know what? Next, I should come down to Dallas. So made the jump.
Awesome. So you ended up in Dallas. What part specifically? Were you kind of by SMU's campus?
So I was North Dallas. Pretty. I didn't want to go all the way down into the city. I just don't like how fast pace is. or the traffic. The traffic can get a little bit messy. I was working in North Dallas at the time. That's when I became a loan officer. And I was like, you know what? I want to be here. I have quick access where I could get downtown in less than 15 minutes. But I was near 635, so just right at Addison, where it's no one really knows whether to call it Dallas, whether to call it Addison, whether to call it Richardson. So right there at the very tip top near like Watermark Church, which if you drive down 635, you will see Watermark Church, and it's impossible to miss it.
Yeah, that's, by the way, I didn't realize they had such a awesome coffee shop / place to go hang out. It's pretty cool if you if you're in the area,
I credit that place. Yeah, I credit that place with allowing me to get licensed as a loan officer, man. I spent probably a month and a half every single morning sitting at that coffee shop. Such a cool spot.
Yeah. For those that've never been, it's really like the coffee shop's cool. It's good coffee, but like what's really cool, at least from my perspective, is like on the exterior, there's like a patio that overlooks like it kind of felt like I was in Colorado. Like there's trees, a little pond, like a bunch of rock formations. It just was a really zen place to hang out.
Yeah, instead of mountains, there's just buildings.
Yeah,
but it is a really cool, relaxing spot.
For sure. So you were on the north side of North Dallas. So kind of you could get to like Galleria pretty quickly. Is that right?
Yeah, like less than 5 minutes getting to the Galleria, and probably 5 or 6 minutes from North Park Mall.
Okay, perfect. So you had, I mean, you didn't have to go very far to have, things to do. Like it was kind of the opposite of kind of what you had in Flower Mound.
Yeah, so man, and it'll eventually lead into where I'm at now, but I was right on the tollway. So Dallas North Tollway runs up to Plano, Frisco, and then also runs right down into Uptown. So I was able to go to Legacy West, or the shops of Legacy, really, really quickly, hang out in the Colony at Truck Yard, or I could go down to Uptown and see more of the real like lively part of Dallas. So both were accessible within 15 minutes. So that was something I was driving 50 minutes, 45 minutes before when I was coming from Flower Mound, and my friend group started shifting that way because being in the city, that's where more the young adults are going to be at.
Mm-hmm. For sure. So what were some of the downfalls of living in that area?
And so once again, I hated the speed of it. I hated all the traffic. I just don't really do well with that coming from a town of 400 people. So it's a little bit of an adjustment. But outside of that, I really grew fond of what I saw in Flower Mound, of having that neighborhood community feel, and it was completely gone. I didn't even know what grocery store I shopped at. So it was just, there were 5 Tom Thumbs within 5 minutes, and I found whichever one. So it was really felt like you could get lost in the mix of things. So really the pace again. So I went all the way to the slow pace in Fort Worth, and then to the really high speed in Dallas. And I was like, man, I really need something in the middle.
Man, you're setting up Plano real good.
Dude, I'm, if you can't tell already, I'm extremely biased to where I live and work now. So I've really, really struck gold.
That's funny. So, I mean, so you obviously you ended up in Plano, and it sounds like it was just, you were ready for things to slow down, but you still wanted the convenience of other things. Is that kind of the thought process behind moving there?
Spot on. So now I barely ever find myself going down to Dallas. I will every probably twice a month. I'll make my way down that way. But there's just about everything that I personally want to do at Legacy West and the Colony around Grandscape that I wouldn't have a reason to go back down. So it's not it's not Fort Worth slow, but it's not Dallas fast. There's plenty of stuff. There's right down the street from an HEB, which go there every single time I ever need anything. And it's just a perfect mix of everything that I was trying to do with Flower Mound and Dallas and Fort Worth, and it just all came together in Plano.
Yeah, a lot of people say that too. And hey, like we live in that area. We're in Allen, but like between Allen, Plano, McKinney, Frisco, all those different places, like you said, there's so many different things to do right in this area. You don't ever need to go to downtown Dallas. It's like it's just like a random like weeknight or a weekend that you want to just go out and have a dinner in Dallas, you can. But a
Hmm.
lot of people kind of stay in this area, and there's a lot of you can get a lot of variety in this area, which is cool.
Yeah,
Is that
when I've been talking to people that like don't live here, when they're thinking about like Prosper and Salina, I'm like, yeah, you're only like 20 minutes from everything, rather than looking on the map and saying, oh, I'm an hour from Dallas. Like, no, you're
yeah,
probably 20 minutes from where everything fun's going on right now.
yep, 100%. Do you what initially attracted you to Plano? Because like it's just a suburb on the map to a lot of people. Like, what made you initially move up north? Were you going there because of like Legacy West or something like that, or what was that reason?
Yeah, so first my office was on the tollway, probably 5 minutes from Legacy West, and I found myself going there for lunch almost every single day, meeting with people, and like, man, this is a really cool crowd where it's not all families, it's not all single people, it's got a ton of stuff to do. It's really nice. It's probably one of the cleaner spots that I've ever been, like relative to a big city. So that was just really attractive to me. So once my time in Dallas had kind of expired, I was starting to get very, very annoyed of having to deal with the city. So made my way up, and it's been beautiful ever since. It's been about a year now.
That's awesome. And so, what's your go-to on the weekends? What's a weekend look like for you in Plano?
Go to is Legacy West. There's Del Frisco's on the end where you can have a little bit of a nicer dinner, and then all the way on the other end, there's Legacy Hall where you have a food court and a brewery overlooking some live music. So there's always something to do down there. Another spot that I'll actually be going to this evening is Truck Yard. Truck Yard is such a cool spot. You can bring your whole family, bring your dog, and then there's just a ton of rustic trucks that it's hard to explain without seeing it, but it's a ton of rustic trucks just stuck into the ground, and then there's a brewery there with food trucks that pull up. So it's just a really relaxing, fun spot where there's a good amount of people, but there's not too many people. It's never like shoulder to shoulder, but you have a ton of people that you can talk to. So those are the main spots that you'll find me at on a Friday or Saturday night.
That's awesome. Yeah, and there's a million more options like that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the newer ones is the Hub over on
Mm-hmm.
it's in Allen, off of
Yep.
Sam Rayburn.
Yep.
That was we just went there last weekend. It was packed, so
Yeah, I
packed.
still haven't been to the Hub, but everyone is talking about it. Everybody in my office lives in McKinney and Allen, and you got to check out the Hub. It's literally Legacy West, but on this side.
Yep. Yeah, man, it's crazy. Just
Uh,
growing up in the Midwest, and then you come to a place like
hmm.
this. Like if we had one of these places in the Midwest, it would have been like amazing, right? Like, but like
Oh yeah,
here, it's just like you have literally an abundance of options. So it's a
yeah,
great, and not having that growing up, it's a cool thing to have right next to you, you know?
yeah. And just for comparison, I drove half an hour for a Buffalo Wild Wings growing up. That was
Yeah.
big time. So that having so many options that are like this caliber is really cool.
That for me it was we had a McDonald's. Actually, we didn't. Most of my life, we did not have anything in my town. But then a McDonald's came, and all of a sudden, every Friday night, that's where we would hang out is McDonald's. So that's kind of what I dealt with growing up too. So
Yeah, it's a
fun
different
stuff.
world, but man, there were other things that drew me to this area. And my mentor, we started just hanging out in the mornings, and we would go ride bikes out on White Rock Creek, I believe it was, and then you could have really good running trails where you feel like you're literally in the woods, and no towers in sight. No, you can't hear a single car, you don't hear anybody honking, and you just kind of escape, but you're right here in Plano still. So
Hmm.
having that as an option where we don't have as much wilderness that you would have like a Colorado or an Idaho or Montana, but you can find ways to escape a little bit in Plano still and have access to everything.
100%. Yeah, Oak Point Park. I don't know if you've been there, but that's one of the best uh,
Mm-hmm.
in Collin County. It's a great spot to go. And there's a few up north of McKinney that I've been to, like Bonnie Wink, that are super great to just get out and get into the woods. So
Mm-hmm.
a lot of options around here for that.
I'll have to check those out.
Yeah. So tell me, like, we talked a lot about the pros of living in Plano. What are some of the downfalls?
Oh, man, this is showing my bias even more where I'm overlooking downfalls. But hmm, if you like the high speed stuff, man, my one of my really good friends, he lives in Grapevine, and like we'll come and hang out where I like to go around Legacy, but he likes the high speed bars down towards the city. He likes the fancier restaurants, which you have those up here, but he likes the thought of being within the towers, to have the real Dallas feel, where you still have that a little bit, but it feels like you're outside. You feel like you're in a different city being here. So if that's what you're wanting, then it might not be the spot, but it's just so clean and it feels so fun up here, man. So I'm just so biased that I might be overlooking some of the things, but um, honestly, this is a big pet peeve. I have to get on a tollway to go anywhere.
Yeah,
121 and the DNT. So that'd probably be the main downside of living here. To get anywhere, you're paying for every mile that you drive.
100%. Yeah, I was talking to somebody that we both mutually know, and they had spent like I think like $1,000, close to $1,000 in tolls just because of shuttling kids back and forth to different things, and
Hmm.
it's like it's just nuts, man. And by no means you have like most people are not spending that much. Don't get me wrong, but if
Yeah.
you're having to use the tollway all the time, it can add up definitely. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
the
but
other
last night I drove down to Dallas to get sushi and just saw my credit card charge $20. I'm like, oh, that's not fun, but it happens.
yeah,
Got to pay to live.
100%. And the other downfall I would bring up is that if you're looking for more space, if having a little bit of a bigger lot is important to you, it's
Hmm.
either you got to be in the millions for budget, or you need to be looking a little bit further outside of the city. And it doesn't have to be like super far out. Like it can still be within Collin County. It's just going to be more on the north side, or it could still be in Denton County. It's just going to have to be further to the west or the north. And so being right here in the action where like the Legacy West and all that kind of stuff is, there's just not as big of lots, generally speaking,
Hmm.
than some of the other areas in town.
Yeah, well, definitely. So I'm working up in McKinney now, where things are starting to expand. It used to be the area that was way on the outskirts. So there's tons of larger lots, whereas I'll be down in Plano or even some of the nicer areas around a million that are a little bit older, where they're just right on top of each other. So things just expanded so quickly in that area that just had to do it to maximize space.
Yeah, 100%. So no matter where you are in the process, reach out. I'd love to help you find the right place to live here in the Dallas, Texas metro. Shoot me a text, give me a call, send me an email anytime. Seriously, I'm here to help you find the perfect fit in the Dallas, Texas metro. Until next time, I'll see you later.